Hey everybody, Wes here. Thanks for joining me today. Today I want to talk about what goes into making a pot. Not how to make a pot, there's other videos about that, but what goes into a pot. And I think that is worth paying attention to, mostly from the perspective of gratitude to Mother Earth. That's what I want to talk about. So the first thing, obviously, that goes into a pot is a piece of clay, which is really amazing stuff. It is all over the world. Clay is made up of tiny, tiny particles. The particles are 0.0002 millimeters or less. How big is that? Well, if you took 25,000 of these particles and lined them up one after another, you'd only have an inch. They're too small to see. It's really remarkable. And when we heat it up, it turns into ceramics, which is great. So what else goes into this? Well, you need to have some kind of temper, especially with prehistoric or primitive kind of pottery. So I'm not going to get into the reasons why, but that temper, it could be ground up old pots, or it could be some non-expansive material like sand or ground granite or different kinds of volcanic materials and things like that. Where does this all come from? It all comes from the earth. And this wouldn't be plastic like this if it weren't for water. We have to add water to this, right? So where does water come from? Obviously from the earth. And if you're from the desert Southwest, you certainly appreciate how important it is. And all of these materials may seem to be abundant, but they are not limitless. There is a finite amount of stuff in our universe and on our earth. So we form a pot. So then what do? Well, in order to form a pot, you kind of need to have a scraper. In this case, it's a traditional gourd scraper. It was grown, came from the earth. It needed dirt and soil and nutrients and so on. And the nice thing about this is it will decompose because it is organic. I actually like to use a plastic scraper, but that comes from the earth too. Plastic is largely carbon. It's going to come from oil. And so the good thing, at least I recycled this piece of plastic. So that's something to think about. In order to make a pot, you usually are going to have a rock for smoothing and polishing it. You need to also shape it. So use other scrapers might be, this is one of my favorite ones. It's an antelope rib. So I have to show gratitude to that antelope. And to use all those different pieces. Certainly natives did that as well. And you need to paint it. Well, you don't need to paint it, but you might want to paint it. Well, where do paints come from? Well, this is a piece of hematite. So red paint comes from red rocks. In fact, red clay has hematite in it, or iron. That's just basically iron. Here's a piece of manganese from an abandoned manganese mine. And obviously, we mine minerals of all kinds, and we know that that has an impact on our environment, that is limited. Here's a piece of copper ore, and copper can be used to make black paint, especially if it is combined with manganese. But there's other ways to make black paint, too. This is a little container with some organic paint. This is beeweed, but you can boil down plants of all different sorts to make beeweed. All of these things come from our earth. They don't happen just by chance. You don't go down to Walmart and buy these things. And even if you did, and in some cases you can, this still comes from the earth. And if we're going to paint these things, that kind of helps if we have a brush. Here is a more traditional yucca brush that we might use for primitive pottery. I really like to use a human hairbrush, or you could use hairs or fur from other animals. And guess what? It's tied on to a stick. Obviously, a piece of wood comes from the earth. Same way with this brush. This is a natural bristle brush, or comes from, I think, a fox's tail probably. But there's synthetic brushes too. Oftentimes, those are carbon-based. Well, we shape our pot, and sometimes we need to even it off, cut it off. So here is an obsidian blade, which can be used as a knife. If you want the more traditional thing, obviously, where does obsidian come from? It's a rock. It's an igneous rock. But you might want to actually use a regular knife. Oh, where does this come? This is iron, right? That's actually the same material that is basically the same material that is used in making red paint. And so we've got iron and brass and wood. All of these things come from the earth. All of these things are of limited supply. And I think, I don't want to get preachy, but we just need to be cognizant of the stuff that we use. But that's not all. So we need to fire our pottery. In order to fire it, we need some kind of fuel. So maybe you have a piece of wood, or maybe coal or charcoal. Or even if you're using a kiln, an electric kiln or a natural gas kiln, all those things come from nature as well. And you can't have a fire without oxygen. And so using up oxygen is something that we just need to know that we're doing it. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. Obviously, I do, but we just need to be aware of the way that we consume the things that we have. So, and I think people are an important part of this equation as well. I would never have made this pot if someone hadn't shared information and taught me. And I am eternally grateful to Andrew Ward and for many other people for sharing their knowledge, their skills, and oftentimes their materials. Many times people trade materials, give materials away, and so on. So people do that. And where do we come from? We are born of the universe. All of the things, all the elements and compounds and things that make up our bodies have come from the earth as well. And so I guess the point I want to make is that we do make an impact. We do have a responsibility. And I think most of all, we have a responsibility of being grateful for having all of these things available. It is kind of humbling to think that we are able to make things from pottery by using the materials that the earth has given us. So again, back to that idea, take what you need, take everything you need, but use all that you take. And just to be cognizant and respectful of whatever that is that you're using. And I am grateful for you to be here as well. Quite frankly, I would not do these videos if you weren't watching them. So I appreciate that. Certainly appreciate the subscriptions and thumbs up and all those kinds of things. So I wish you a happy holidays, a good new year, and certainly health, happiness, peace, and love. Take care. Bye-bye.